Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Family Citizen Science. It's a beautiful day here in Pierce, South Dakota. No clouds, no wind, probably around, I don't know, 10 degrees Celsius, maybe a little bit warmer in the sun. And I'm using Celsius today because we have a very special guest that I'll introduce in just a moment. But as a refresher, this is our time to talk about citizen science that you can do as a family. And we're going to be talking about an extra special app that is sort of the little sibling app of the iNaturalist app that we've talked about. iNaturalist, of course, is a platform, an online platform where you can take pictures of organisms, plants and animals, and upload them to the iNaturalist website and document your observation. And there, scientists and researchers can use your information. If you take an observation and two people agree to this as to which species it is, that is called research grade, and it goes into the GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Index facility. And it's available for researchers all over the world to learn about biodiversity, and you help contribute to that. However, we are going to talk about another app where if you feel like that's a little bit much, and we're going to talk about it in England. Our guest today is Matt Larsen-Daw of the WWF UK. So Matt, if you could join us, please. Good morning here. What time is it there?
It is 4 o'clock in the afternoon here, and I was very jealous of your description of the weather because that is not what it's like here. It is raining and a little bit cold, even after we've had 2 lovely weeks of sunny weather.
I saw your garden tour, as you were calling it, on social media last week, which put me in mind of, well, hey, maybe he'd like to do his garden tour for us here. Just as a vocabulary, when you talk about garden, that's something different to us in the U.S. We call it our backyard, because a garden is a very specific, like we grow vegetables or flowers. But is that a correct understanding of what a garden is in the
Yeah,
UK?
I mean my backyard.
Yeah.
So when we say backyard over here, we normally mean we don't have any green. It means that we've got a courtyard, so just pavement or decking. And if you've got green, if you've got, whether or not you're growing vegetables, if you've got flowers and plants, you're going to call it a garden. We like to talk about our English country gardens.
Yes, that's a great tune that that I listened to every year when I was in elementary school on May Day, and we wove the maypole. So I'm kind of envious at how green you are. Do you want to give us a little tour and tell us what's happening in your garden and what you've been exploring? Just as a way of context, is on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're talking about being an explorer and how we can explore our backyard. So you would give us the tour of where you are and what you're seeing and the tools you're using.
Absolutely. So I'll give you a look. So at the moment, I'm sheltering under this rather nice little red prunus tree because of the rain, but I'm going to venture out for you. And so I'll start at the back of my garden, and here we have an area that I guess is more like what we'd consider to be a backyard with sheds, so we can store everything, and it's all paved. So normally, if I'm doing a biodiversity study on my garden, I'd kind of leave this bit out, but actually nowhere in the garden is short of wildlife. So at the moment, if I come down here, we've got these pots that aren't in use anymore, and the bricks, and that's always a safe bet.
I'm going to just interrupt real quick. Sarah, can you do full screen on Matt? Because the things he's showing us are really interesting. I really want to get a close-up on that. Or not?
Well, I'll start talking, and then maybe we'll go full screen. So yeah, this was just to show that one of the principles that I ask people to put in place if they're doing a garden safari, no matter how small their garden, no matter how small their backyard, is don't just go with the view that you normally take. Look closer and look under, and this is a perfect example of that. So normally this corner, you'd think there's nothing really here of any interest, but you just have to flip up anything, and you get some really interesting little things to see there. So I don't know if you can see, there's some spider egg sacs there and some spiders guarding them. That one, if you can see, is there, oh, there we go. So the reason I show you that one is that one's actually a false widow. And when we first discovered that we had false widows in London, lots of people were worried because they do have a venomous bite, but they're really not dangerous. They're called false widows because people mistake them for black widows that are one of our few really dangerous spiders here in the UK. And now you can find false widows pretty much anywhere in London. People still worry a little bit, and they guard their egg sacs. And I love those, watching those egg sacs develop every year because they get fatter and fatter. Oh. Wow. I've just found out how to flip the video, so I'll be able to show you things much easier next time. Okay. Then if I come out of this area into what you consider to be the greener area of my garden, everything has taken a new lease of life in the last couple of weeks. We've had glorious sunny weather, would you believe? Not typical for England. We've had my cherry tree, which I'm just showing you there, has been absolutely alive with colour, with bright white blossom, and it's been attracting all the pollinators. We've had bees, we've had hoverflies, we've had insects, all kinds of pollinating insects have been visiting the garden just because of that tree. And we've had 1 week of amazing pollen and amazing blossom, and already it's faded because we've had so much sunshine and all the pollinators have come to the same place that all of the flowers have been pollinated, and therefore the tree's saying, well, that's enough, and it's dropping all the blossom on the ground, as you can see. And what you'll see before that happens is that what was pure white blossom, more like this young cherry tree that came a little bit later, all of the blossom that's now falling to the ground from this big tree is pink. And the reason for that is because when a flower has been visited by a pollinator, as far as the tree is concerned, that's all it needed it for. It's got the pollen, it can make the fruit, it can make the cherry, and so it turns pink, it turns red, slightly red. Insects can't see the color red, so the bees and the other pollinators tend to ignore those flowers and head straight for the ones that are still bright white. And that's a great way that the tree ensures that all of its flowers get visited and all of its flowers get turned into fruit. So seeing that in action just over the course of a few days has been great. And then I'll take you further around here. Got like a second half of my garden, which, as you can see, is a little bit more in use. But here we've got some really beautiful flowers coming out all over the place, including some bluebells. Unfortunately, they're not the native English bluebells, as I discovered when I put them through the Seek app. They are Spanish bluebells, and that is a real problem here in the UK. A lot of bluebells that used to be whole blankets, a lot of woods rather, that used to have blankets of traditional English bluebells have been taken over by Spanish bluebells because they're a stronger species, and they interbreed, and you end up with hybrids and eventually far more Spanish than English bluebells. So that's even happening in our suburban garden here. And then last thing I wanted to show you was that we have a really great ivy covered fence here, which every year is really popular with our blackbirds. They come and visit and build their nest. So right now there's a nest that has already been used and the blackbirds have gone. I'm going to see if I can show you with the camera on here. I'm not sure this will work. I've got no idea if that works for you, but luckily it doesn't matter if it didn't, because here's one I made earlier. So this is a blackbird's nest from last year, and as you can see, it's come detached from the ivy, but you can appreciate the amazing way it was built, with sticks and straw around the outside, smaller twigs and leaves on the inside, and then a wall of mud all the way around the outside and the bottom to hold it in place, and also to give it strength and weight. I always find that amazing, how heavy a bird's nest is, and just to think that every little bit of mud in that was carried in the mouth of a bird to get it into its position. So that's just a little quick lightning tour of my garden.
Wow, that is really fascinating, that you have all of that. Now, are you in an urban area or like London? Where exactly in England are you?
So technically I am in London. I'm in West London, so in the sort of suburban area, just inside the big ring road, the M25. So it's, you know, it's fairly well populated, but it's not as urban as central London. And so gardens like this, you just wouldn't get many of these in central London. But here in Hampton, which is where I live, there's whole roads where everyone has a garden of about this size. And it really does make a huge difference, particularly at the moment in lockdown, and being able to explore lots of different wildlife without actually leaving home is a bit of a blessing.
So in the UK there, you are also limited to where you can go. You're at home, kids aren't at school, you're not going into work. Only people who are working are the essential workers, like here.
That's right. Yeah, at the moment we're in exactly the same situation. So yeah, I've got my two kids at home, and trying to find things for them to do. The garden comes in useful then as well, but particularly yeah, watching wildlife at this time of year is it's the best time of year here in the UK for wildlife. As I said, everything's springing into life, and everything that has been hiding away for the last few months is coming out to play. So that's really lovely to go out and discover with my toddler, particularly.
So we have a comment from one of our in our Facebook chat is someone wants to go to London, and I really feel that right now. I think you're inspiring future tourism. I want to get back to something you said about when you were looking at the bluebells, and you talked about Seek the app. So tell us a little bit about that and how you're using it in your garden and in your explorations.
Absolutely. So Seek is an app that was developed to accompany the Planet series on Netflix. I don't know if anyone's seen that. It's a sweeping kind of global natural history documentary that looks at all of the biomes on our planet. And I was responsible for the education program that accompanied that. And what we really wanted to do was make sure that if people were inspired by what they saw in terms of biodiversity and life on our planet, that they didn't just think about those places that are far off and those huge incredible species like tigers, blue whales, polar bears, but also they reflected on the fact that nature is all around us all of the time, and there's always wonders to discover. And often some of the most fascinating things are on our doorstep. We just go straight past them all the time. We just don't get close enough to take a look, or if we do, we don't know what we're looking at, and therefore we don't think about it for very long. So Seek is designed to help anyone, no matter how good your knowledge of the natural world is. It allows anyone to explore the wildlife on their doorstep, learn about it, and then think about what they can do to protect and restore biodiversity in their immediate local area. So the way it works is absolutely fascinating. Probably a good time to show that video that's available, and I'll just kind of talk over. I was going to demonstrate the app, but it probably wouldn't have worked very well screen to screen, so this is probably a lot easier. So it's a free app, and it's available for Apple and Android. Just search Seek by iNaturalist, add by iNaturalist, just because it will be easier to sort it out from the other apps called Seek. And just, we can just turn the sound down, that'd be great. I'll talk over the music, but if it's possible to turn the music up, that would be great. So as you can see from the video, the guy in the video is scanning with his phone through the app. He's not taking a picture straight away, he's just scanning, and what happens is the app is seeing what your camera is seeing, and in real time it's comparing it with the huge database of biodiversity sightings that has been built up over years and years on the iNaturalist platform. And the app uses machine learning and image recognition. So it's comparing the shapes and the colors and the patterns that it's seeing with this massive database. And it's saying, well, okay, there's something with this color, there's something with this shape, there's something with this pattern, and that was this species because it's been identified and it's been confirmed as identified on the iNaturalist platform. And so it can then tell you what it thinks you found. And it's got so many millions of observations to work on that it can actually do this incredibly accurately. And by doing it in real time, that's an absolute godsend if you are trying to get a good observation of something, you don't know what it is, and you're not actually that knowledgeable about it yourself, because the app will be telling you whether or not it can tell you exactly what it is, or whether it needs more information. So for example, if I flip this, if I was to come down and have a look at the bluebells that I mentioned earlier, so these are different from British bluebells because they are lighter in colour. We obviously are calling them bluebells, but these look more purple. They're lighter. They also flare at the ends, so the petals flare out like this, and our native bluebells just droop. And also you'll see that the sprigs themselves, the stems themselves, come straight up, and some of the flowers poke upwards at the end, whereas native bluebells droop downwards like that. So iNaturalist, or rather Seek, will be able to see those details and will be able to tell that that is different, a different flower from the native bluebell. However, if you were too far away, then when it's comparing images, it might not have enough detail. And so it might be assuming, because you're in England, that what you're seeing is going to be a native bluebell, and it could sort of tell you, well, I'm not quite sure which species it is, but I can tell you it's in this family or it's in this order. So the same would apply if you were looking at any kind of flower, any kind of plant, any kind of insect. The Seek app will tell you what it can, but it will also tell you if it's not able to give you a complete species recognition. And that gives you the opportunity to change the way that you're observing it. You can get closer, you can change your angle, you can make sure that you've got both the flower and the petals in, or make sure that you've actually got the bug that you're trying to identify on a plain background so that it can actually see the shape properly. And then when you can see that the app has actually got a full species recognition, that's when you can take the picture, knowing that you've got a proper species observation. So it's like having not only a really informed naturalist on hand to tell you what something is, but also someone who can guide you in how to take a really good observation of that, so that you can upload it to iNaturalist, contribute to citizen science, and also get the information that you want.
So you mentioned taking pictures, using Seek, and using the camera and getting the pictures. And obviously, I've done that, and my pictures are not always amazing. Help us. What are some of your tips for taking good pictures so that Seek is able to identify your organism?
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing is always focus. So sometimes it's tempting to just kind of get as close as you possibly can and capture a photo, and you think, well, it's going to be the best photo possible because I got as close as possible. That's not always the case. So sometimes when you get close, it can be really unclear to the eye and also to the app where something starts and finishes. So if you're not showing, for example, the whole shape of a leaf, then it won't be able to tell what that shape is. It won't be able to compare it with other leaves on the image database. And with insects, if you get really, really close, they might be bigger in the frame, but they're not in focus because you were too close to the lens. So it's better to take a slightly more considered view and to make sure that you're looking at the frame, the whole frame, and you're thinking, what am I cutting off with the edge of the frame? And what am I making sure is in the frame that needs to be there? And if there are things that are in the frame that don't need to be there, that makes for not such a good photo because it's distracting. You're bringing things in, and someone looking at the photo isn't sure where to look. And the app's going to be doing the same thing. It's going to be thinking, okay, I can see two things here. Which one does this user want me to identify? And it won't know, and it'll get confused, or it might try and find something that would have both of those elements when it probably wouldn't. So that we've got a user guide, which is available on our website, which is up on screen. I can see. Thank you for that. And if you look for the top tips for observing wildlife link, you'll find that there's a really handy 3-page user guide, and it has some really good tips for taking good observations. And particularly, there's a whole set of tips, especially for those that want to take good pictures of bugs, because they are the hardest thing to observe well, because they move while you're trying to observe them, and it's sometimes hard enough to get any picture of them, let alone a good one. So we've advised there that there's a few different techniques that you can put in place to make sure that you get pictures that the app can identify, and also pictures that are actually useful for you. So I'll share I'll share 2 tips on that. The first one is that sometimes the easiest thing is actually to take something out of its environment. So if it's a spider or a woodlouse, or I don't know what you call woodlice actually in the US, but if it's some kind of bug that you can actually scoop up without harming it, then you'll be able to put it on a flat piece of paper in a jar or in a dish and take a really clear picture of it, which you can just spend some time getting in focus. And that will help get a really strong identification, and then you can put it back again without harming it. And in our guides, we just recommend that you try not to use your bare hands. You try and scoop up with a leaf, or just sort of brush into a jar, because it's surprising how easy it is to hurt some creatures with your own hands. And then the other thing that you can do, particularly with flying insects, that it just would not be possible to collect and take out of the environment without harming them. Instead of trying to chase them, just get somewhere stationary where you know pollinators or other insects are buzzing around and occasionally landing, and then just take up station so that you're still. Take a bit of a mindful approach. Make yourself still, just relax, enjoy the environment, have the flowering plant in front of you, and have your camera or your phone ready to focus on the flower, and then just wait until something lands there. So it might take a little bit longer, and it might be a little bit frustrating at times, but you're much more likely to be able to get a decent picture, because the insect won't be scared off by your movement. It's likely to come closer, and you'll already be ready to focus in the right place.
Awesome. We do have a couple of questions. Going back to your bluebells, 2 people are wondering, why are they named bluebells when they are purple in color?
It's a very good question. They do look slightly more blue before, when they first flower. But the British bluebells that they are actually named after, that's sort of the where the name has come from, are dark blue. They are genuinely blue, and it's the Spanish ones that have been named bluebells because they're basically the same family as our native bluebells, and therefore we're still calling them bluebells. But the name has actually come from our version, which is blue, and we're just applying it to a flower that is, in fact, as you say, more purple.
There was a question of, do we have bluebells in South Dakota? And yes, we do. I'll share a link to our iNaturalist observations of bluebells in South Dakota. And then,
and that's, can I chip in there, Anne? Because that's a really good point. One thing I jumped straight, because of the video, I jumped straight into how you take observations with Seek. It's actually an amazing app just for having as a reference. So when you load up the app, one of the first things you'll see is a little list of species with pictures that you can expect to find. And they're species that you can expect to find in your local area, but also at that time of year. So it's like having a perfectly customized reference book that's just been made for you at that time. So I absolutely love that. I often don't actually go out with Seek to take observations. I just refer to it and sort of check what I've already seen or what I can expect to see, so I can go out kind of looking for something. And what's great about it is you'll start off with just a strip of mixed species. So you might have some plants, you might have some spiders, you might have some insects, but you can actually filter. So you can change the filter to just spiders or just arachnids, or just flowers, or just fungus, and so on. And if you do that, then obviously you get more of that thing. So I did a big spider hunt with my daughter, and there were a few spiders that we just couldn't get a really good picture of because they were a bit small and a bit fast moving. So we couldn't actually get an observation using the app's camera. But we could look through the spiders that we'd expect to find locally, and we identified it that way. So it's a really good source of information, regardless of whether you're actually using it to take observations for citizen science. And then if you click through either to a species that's in that list or one that you've just observed and it's told you what species it is, you'll find loads of information about it. You'll find where you'd expect to find it. You'll find how rare it is for your area. So that can be quite exciting to find that you've been one of the first people to observe something in your area. Is that going to become a common trend, or is it, just something that happened as a one-off? And you can also discover what other species it feeds on and so on. So you can kind of understand your ecosystem a bit better.
We have another question. Do you have a lot of flowers?
In my garden or in this part of the country?
I'm thinking either. Your
We do.
garden looks very verdant and you have to understand, and I guess Amanda's family, this is a part of the question, is that rainfall really determines how much vegetation, how many plants can grow. And so in South Dakota, we're a semi-arid climate. So tell us a little bit about your climate and about the amount of flowers that you have in your region.
So yeah, well, the 2 weeks of bright sunshine that we've just had are pretty rare here. So even in the summer, we tend to have quite a lot of rainfall. So it's definitely not a problem on the whole having flowering plants that need quite a lot of water. And although it occasionally happens that we have a ban on hose pipes because of a lack of rainfall, generally speaking, we can water our gardens without that being a problem. So we've got a lot of flowering plants here in my garden. We're quite keen on attracting pollinators. So we plant quite a few wildflowers, and a lot of things have just sprung up because they've just spread there naturally from seeds just coming in from the ground. From the air. So I'm just thinking of a good example. I'll flip it again. So this, for example, was not planted. This has just come up entirely on its own, and we've just let it flourish. This is not flowering at the moment, but this is an oregano herb, and that is coming up everywhere along with lemon balm here. And so what we've tended to do with our garden is we have just let it do what it wants, which tends to be the way to get a healthy garden, because you're likely to get the things which actually want to be there because they're right. And it also means that we've got a good variety of things. So some things come into flower at one time in the year, and some things come into flower a few months later, so that we're actually offering food for pollinators all year round. And we've actually got, on that theme, if I just flip again and take you down here. Oh, it's Bumblebee. So, sorry, it's just focusing there. So I don't know if you can see, but there's a little young tree that's growing here. And I'd be interested if anyone can recognize that, but I can tell you that it's a hazel tree. And that's just growing up as a seedling because we have squirrels that come into our garden and bury hazelnuts. And then, of course, sometimes they forget where they buried them, and they're allowed to turn into young trees. So sometimes what we have to do is we have to dig up young hazel saplings from our lawn or from our flower bed and go and find them a place to grow. So replant them either in a pot to start with, or go out and find somewhere where there's space for them to grow in a hedgerow. So we've got no hazel trees in this garden, but again, nature finds a way.
That's fascinating. If we were to just let our gardens go without watering them, they'd be dry and dead pretty quickly. We don't get much rainfall. And just as a point, again, I'm translating here. Oregano herb is oregano. That's how we pronounce it in the U.S. So in case you're just
Sorry.
wondering. So we speak the same language, sort of. Yeah. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions, but thank you so much for joining us. This was fascinating. I feel like I've been to England and I didn't even leave my house. So
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
yeah, and download the Seek app. Another important thing that let your parents know, for those of you who are watching, that this doesn't collect data. You don't need an account. You can just download it and use it on the fly. So if you're worried about privacy or geolocation or any of that, Seek does not collect any of that. So this is a really good app to allow to use with kids because you're not tracking anything.
I will just say it doesn't as standard, but then you can connect it to iNaturalist. So when you are using it, you can then set an account up and upload your sightings as you would if you were on iNaturalist. But you do need parental permissions to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's available as an option.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matt. Have a wonderful weekend. It was fascinating, and yeah, this was great. So thank you to all of our regular viewers and those who are watching in the future. So have a good weekend. Stay safe, stay curious, and go explore.